friend. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Java with Juli. This podcast is an outreach of authentic intimacy, a ministry dedicated to helping you make sense of God and sexuality. Well, I am excited about the conversation that I'm going to share today because it's about something that I think has really been lost in our culture, and that is the issue of separation. A few years ago, I sat down with best-selling author Dr. Gary Chapman to talk about his newest book at that time, which is called One More Try. And we talked about the idea that separation, when it's done with guidance and wisdom and purpose, can actually be a step towards healing rather than just a step towards divorce. But what does that actually look like? And how do you set your marriage up for success when you already feel like you might be at a breaking point? Well, that's what we're going to find out. And this episode might be great for you, or it might be one that you want to send to a friend who's really struggling in their marriage. Now, when I say that I sat down with Dr. Chapman a few years ago, I really mean more like 10 years ago. So you might even notice a difference in my voice and hear the coffee shop noise in the background. But this is such an important episode that I really feel like we needed to bring it back up for you to listen to. So let's head to the coffee shop and jump right into my conversation with Dr. Gary Chapman. Even though we might talk about separation and throw it out there as an option, almost every marriage that goes through a hard time getting to the point where they feel like they just can't tolerate this anymore, they immediately jump to the solution of divorce. And I don't even think people understand what separation is or what the purpose of it would be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people who separate, they do it with a view to divorcing. And they put up with things for so long that they feel like there's no hope. And they really separate for survival. Mm-hmm. They're just getting out of a bad situation. And I understand that. I understand how you can get there. But for me, separation should be purposeful. And the purpose, as I see it, is to communicate to the other person, I care about you, I love you, not in the sense of I have bubbly feelings for you, but I am committed to your well-being, but I cannot stay here in this situation because I'm not helping you. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, I'm going to leave, I'm going to get me an apartment, I'm going to live with my mother, I'm going to do whatever, and I want you to know that I am not abandoning you. I am willing to work with you. If you are willing to deal with the problem, whatever it is, I am willing to join you in marriage counseling down the road. But I love you too much to stay here and do nothing. Mm-hmm. Therefore, this is what I'm going to do. So the separation is a purposeful thing. It's trying to communicate to the other person in a way that words have not been able to do, that we've got to do something different. I'm not going to go on like this in this relationship. In that sense, separation is an act of love. But that's not how most people separate.
How does it usually happen? What's the typical scenario?
Usually they separate because they've put up with this for a long time and they're just so angry and so hurt that they just say, I'm getting out of here, I can't stand this, and they just move out. And maybe don't even tell the person that they're moving out. They just write them a note and say, I'm gone. Uh-huh. And in their mind, they're planning for divorce as quickly as they can get it. And that depends on the state they live in. You know, North Carolina, where I live, you have to wait 1 year before you can get a divorce.
I like that.
That's not true in a lot of states, but I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Because it gives them a year to cool down. Mm-hmm. Think about what they're doing before they make the final decision to divorce.
You mentioned that when it comes to separation, and the way you described it is very logical, it's very clinical, it's the way it should be, but when you're in the midst of that, you're neither logical nor clinical.
Yeah, right.
You're just trying to survive.
Yeah. And
as you mentioned, you're so angry, you're so hurt that you really can't see things clearly, you can't think things through. How about the situation where, let's say it's a woman that has children at home, and it's not an option for her to leave, or it's not best for her to leave. What she really wants to do is get him to leave. Yeah. Maybe he's an alcoholic, or maybe he's in some ways destructive. Again, how do you make wise decisions in the middle of a situation like that, considering your children, considering all the anger you have, and not destroy things further?
Yeah. Julie, that's why I suggest to a person in that situation, before you do anything, go talk to a counselor. Go talk to a pastor. Let somebody who's not involved in your situation emotionally help you think through this. What's the best way to go about this? Because that's really what you want to do. You want to make the best decision, not just a decision to, on the spur of a moment, out of heated anger, to just get out of there. And counselors have worked with people through the years with this, and they can walk with you and not only give suggestions on how to do it, but they can be with you while you're doing it to help you, process your own feelings. Because I think if you're going to make a decision that big to step out of the marriage, whether it's separation or divorce, you need to have somebody who's more level-headed than you are at the moment help you think through the implications of what you're doing. Because divorce doesn't solve everything. If your spouse died, okay, you can go on. But divorced, they're going to be there until they die, Now, don't go kill them, but...
But you're talking about every birthday party and weddings and graduations.
Yeah, everything.
They're going to be part of your life. It's a living death, some people have said.
Yeah, so
and I also noticed that you said go talk to a counselor or pastor. You didn't say go talk to your mom, go talk to your best friend. Those are the people that we usually run to, but they're not always the ones to give us the best objective advice.
No, because you've gone to your mother every time some little thing happened, and now your mother hates your spouse anyway, and so you tell her this latest thing, and she says, honey, you got to get out of there.
Yeah, it's about time.
Yeah, about time. Yeah.
Have you seen that the support system of a person sometimes can actually be destructive in that way? And maybe it's even their friends from church, or it's their family who loves them. We're talking to people who right now maybe are going through the separation process or divorce process, but we're also talking to people who are influencing marriages, people you love, people you work with. They're going to ask your advice or share their situation. How do you make sure that you're not contributing to the destruction?
Julie, I think that's a great question, because I think it does happen, and particularly with close friends and family. Because they've seen you hurt, they've seen you weep over all the situation, and they love you. And sometimes, let's face it, it looks like the best thing for you to do is get out of there, and that may be the best thing. But you need to have all the inputs you can have, not just from your friends who just want you to be safe or something. Now, if it's physical abuse, that, to me, there's no question. If there's physical abuse, you do need to step out of that, because it'll repeat itself again and again and again, and it's not loving to stay in that situation. But often, couples give up not because there's been verbal abuse or physical abuse, but they just haven't been able to solve conflicts. They disagree on everything. They argue about everything, and they don't ever resolve anything. And after a few years of that, you get to thinking, it's not going to be any better. And we just made a mistake. We just need to get out of this. And those are the kind of people that really, really need help, because there is hope for them. I understand how they lose hope, when you're in that situation. But one of the reasons I wrote this book, One More Try, What to Do When Your Marriage is Falling Apart, is because a lot of people have the idea, well, we've tried everything. Well, they haven't. You ask them, well, no, we've never been to a counselor, but, well, no, we haven't read any books about it, but they feel like they've tried everything, but, they've never talked to a pastor about it. So it's a whole lot of things they haven't done yet. And what I'm saying is, before you make a decision that radical that's going to affect the two of you, and if you have children, your children, it's going to affect them forever. Let's get all the help we can here to make sure that you're doing the best thing. I just believe that many couples who come to the point of separation could be reconciled if they had the proper help. And in this book, I'm trying to, first of all, give them some ideas, and then I'm trying to encourage them to let somebody help them. I believe that there's just so many marriages that could be saved if they could get the right help.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I know marriages, either from a professional standpoint or a personal standpoint, where it's like, wow, I think they could work this kind of stuff out. But what ends up happening is one or both of them have given up.
Yeah.
So even though they might say, okay, we'll go see a counselor, or we'll try this, or we'll read this book, or go to an intensive, one or both of them have already checked out and said, I'll give it this one last try, but in my heart and in my mind, I've already made my plans for the next part of my life.
Yeah. And I think also coupled with that, many times they are already involved with someone else. They've got an emotional affair going, at least, with someone else.
Yeah.
And so now that complicates the problem, because they're comparing this person with whom they have this emotional attachment now with the awfulness of this marriage relationship.
And there's no comparison.
There's no comparison between those two. Yeah. And I'm very empathetic with that situation. I can see how people get to that place. What I would say to them is this: I understand where you are. I see how you could be there. But before you do that, would you be willing to do this, that, or the other thing? Some positive step that they can take. I think if they're willing, like I've had them come to my marriage seminar, and they come separated. They don't even sit together, but they both come, and just over the course of one day, and they hear some things, and practical ideas, and they walk out and say to each other, maybe we should try some of that.
Yeah.
Hope can be reborn. But you have to have something to attach your hope to. And that's where, reading a book or talking to a counselor or a pastor can give you some things to attach your hope to, and you begin to take steps. Marriages are reborn one step at a time. It's not a magic wand that's waved. It's that we start doing things differently. We start talking differently to each other. We start treating each other different. We change our attitude toward each other. And then things begin to change.
And you're talking about these actions that we can change. The deeper issue is whether your heart's still open.
Yeah.
And that's scary. Hope can be very scary, because I've been hurt before. I trusted before. I was vulnerable before. And if I begin to hope again and give this person access to my heart again, I don't know if I want to go there.
Yeah.
How do you get past that fear?
Yeah, I think that is a legitimate fear, particularly if it's happened over and over and over again. And that's why I think there is a place for tough love that says, my heart tells me get out of here. My mind tells me, if they're a Christian especially, my mind tells me I should work on this. And so one of the ways I'm going to work on this is to request of you one more time that you see a counselor to deal with this problem. And if you're not willing to take at least that simple step, then I'm going to move out. So what you're doing is you're being honest about your feelings, but you're also choosing to do something that according to Scripture, is right. And it doesn't mean that it necessarily is going to solve things, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And if they get help for that problem, whatever that problem is, there is help for that. I mean, that's the whole Christian message. People can be redeemed,
Absolutely. What is the difference between moving out and moving on?
I think there's a big difference. Moving out says, this is the step I'm taking, hoping that something will happen here that we can be reconciled. Moving on says, I'm not only moving out, I'm through with you. I'm not willing to do anything else. And they are moving on with their life. I think those two are very different. But I think those who have decided to move on can turn around. You can come back, same road you walked away, if something happens in the other person's life.
If you've been listening to Java with Juli for a while, have you noticed that there aren't any ads here? Well, that's intentional, because we want this podcast to feel like a safe place for conversations about God and sexuality. At Authentic Intimacy, we hear every day how much these conversations matter. And if this podcast has encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you feel just a little less alone, would you consider becoming a monthly donor? Your partnership helps us reach more people with truth, hope, and healing, and I would love to have you as part of our team. As a way to say thank you, I'm going to send you a copy of my new updated book, 25 Questions You're Afraid to Ask About Love, Sex, and Intimacy. You can become a monthly partner today at AuthenticIntimacy.com/give, or just look for a link in the show notes. Now let's head to the coffee shop. What do you think about a situation where a man or a woman has moved out and is saying, I'm separating for the purpose of tough love, and I don't want a divorce, but it's been 5 years now. It's been 7 years now. It's been 10 years now. From a biblical perspective, would you encourage that person to move on? Or do you think as long as there's the potential of this person changing and our marriage being restored, that you wait, no matter how long that might be?
That's a tough question. a lot depends on where the other person is. Most of the time, if it's been 2 or 3 years, the other person is already involved with someone else. Mm-hmm. So they, in essence, are breaking the covenant because they're sexually involved with someone else. And if that persists for a while, I'm not going to tell you to sit there 20 years when they're living a sinful lifestyle. Maybe they're already remarried, I think there does come a place in which you realize reconciliation is not going to take place, and I must now move on. Mm-hmm. One person cannot restore marriage. It has to be. The other person has to respond somewhere down the line. Yeah. And if you've given God time to work in their hearts for 2 or 3 years and they still have not responded, I do think there's a place to move on with your life.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is going to get into some delicate areas here, but this is reality. Let's say there's been a situation where one of the people has been sexually unfaithful, but they never have gotten married to another person. And you're working towards reconciliation. You're working towards the marriage rebuilding trust. In today's day and age, what do you do with things even like sexually transmitted diseases and the impact of what happened in that time where there was a brokenness?
I think whenever that happens, first of all, if we are working toward reconciliation, we both have to be willing, especially the one who's been involved with someone else, willing to do physical tests to see if there is some sexually transmitted disease there, and that has to be dealt with. Uh-huh. And that's a real part of the reconciliation process. I mean, it's absolutely incredibly wrong to just hide all of that and just move back into a marriage and give somebody else a disease. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I think we have to be open and honest. Reconciliation requires that everything's on the table, and we're genuinely trying to build a relationship, not like we had, but one that's open and honest with each other. Yeah. And can all of that stuff be forgiven? Yes, it can be forgiven. Mm-hmm. But forgiveness doesn't remove all the consequences of sin. I think in our culture, Christian culture, we've often emphasized forgiveness so much that people think, no big deal, you can do wrong, God will forgive you, and everybody else will forgive you, and it's just like it was. No, It's not like it was. Yeah. There are consequences to doing wrong, and those scars you have to live with forever. So we're never better for having sinned. Sin's a big deal. And so I just think we need to be honest with people and help them understand when you do wrong and you violate God's commands, there's going to be negative consequences. Yes, God will forgive you. Yes, your spouse will likely forgive you, but there's still consequences.
And perhaps the best example of that in Scripture is King David. Everybody pretty much knows his sin in terms of the adultery and the murder, and God forgave him, and he was so repentant. But if you continue to read the story of his life and even his children, there were really severe, painful, awful consequences, and that God said this is the direct result of the choices that you made. Yeah. That's pretty sobering.
It is, and sometimes I think we blame God for those things. Why did God let this happen? Well, it's just simply the fallout from our wrong. It's not that God is zapping everybody. If God zapped all of us when we did wrong, we'd all be gone,
We'd all be toast.
God is long-suffering. He doesn't want any of us to perish. He's willing to forgive all of us. But we do live with the consequences of our decisions, and those consequences are often really pretty detrimental.
Another aspect of this that I think a lot of Christians get confused about is the legal part. There are legal separations in, if not all, most states, and that's to protect people financially. It's to work out childcare arrangements and parenting. Obviously, there's a legal side to divorce if someone's filing divorce in a marriage. What is your perspective on that as a Christian? And I guess part of what I love for you to address is when you decide that you're separating or getting a divorce, do you go find the person that's going to protect your interests no matter what and kind of be a pit bull in the courtroom? Or do you have kind of more the spirit of kindness and mercy even when it comes to the legal and financial issues?
I think our goal should be equality, equity. We're not going to make them pay back for what they did wrong by trying to get everything they've got. nor are we going to try to hide assets from the spouse so that they don't know I've got all this. Yeah, I mean, all these kind of things go on all the time.
You see lots of games people play.
And sometimes they end up spending more money on attorneys. The two attorneys are fighting over a 12-month period. They spend more money on the attorneys, and they both have lost now several $100,000 sometimes. So you do have to do it legally, and attorneys are required to do it legally. But if both of you have the attitude we want financially, we want to do what's equitable here, and when I say equitable, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going 50-50 split everything, because a wife may have 3 small children and not be able to work outside the home, and the husband is able to work outside the home, and so equity means he would have a responsibility to give money to raise those kids, for several years. So, but I think if the two of you can't agree on it, and go to a counselor and say, this is what our lawyer, and say, this is what we've agreed on, will you help us do this? Then you have to go the legal route. So his lawyer fights your lawyer, and it's a process that it's inevitable if the two of you can't agree on it.
And does that have to happen in a separation situation as well, where you each have a lawyer representing you, or can it be more amiable?
Well, again, it depends on the two of you. Because as you said, the separation papers basically deal with child care, how we're going to deal with children, and assets, how we're going to deal with assets while we're separated. And many times the financial part is set up in the separation papers that then is just duplicated in the divorce papers. Not necessarily always, but sometimes that's the case. So you want to have it as equitable as you can while you're going through the separation papers.
What's God's heart on all this? We talk about all these practical implications, and we see that separation and divorce is a reality for many, many couples in the church. How do we understand his heart?
I think God weeps. You remember Jesus looked out over Jerusalem? How many times he said, well, I have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks, and you wouldn't come. I think God looks at our hard hearts, and I think he weeps. I think he says, I wanted you to have this kind of relationship, loving, supportive. This is why I made you male and female, to love and support and care and encourage each other. I had great plans for you. I just think God cries. I think he cares. I don't think he's beating people over the head with a whip, and condemning them. I think he's just weeping for them.
And even as you're saying that, there's tears in your eyes.
Yeah.
There's something significant about us weeping with the Lord when the tragedy of separation and divorce and broken marriages happen.
Yeah.
It should never be commonplace.
You're right. Julie, I sometimes cry in the counseling room. I just, it's like they're my children. They're not my children, but they're God's children. And you just hurt for people. You want so much for them to have what they want. They want a good life. Nobody gets married wanting to be miserable. We get married thinking we're going to love each other, we're going to make each other happy, we're going to do these wonderful things together. And it's so tragic that the enemy gets in between us, and we get all self-centered and bent out of shape, and we end up fighting each other and destroying the very thing that we wanted when we got married. And we think, well, we just married the wrong person, we'll find the right person, it'll be better the next time. The divorce rate in second marriages, as you know, is higher than first marriages. And third marriages is higher still. The answer is not running. The answer is learning how to love and rebuild the relationship. Wherever you are in the journey, God wants to see you rebuild it.
Well, Dr. Chapman, I so appreciate the tenderness and the fact that you do cry in the counseling room, because you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And it would be very easy to become callous and just have said, I've seen hundreds of marriages falling apart. What's the big deal with another one? But the fact that you still have a sense of God's heart and how he weeps, that's just significant. Yeah. And I wondered if you would just pray. We believe so much in the power of prayer that God can take a couple that just feels like there's no hope and give them hope. So would you just close us in prayer?
Sure. Father, you know what we're talking about, and you know the couples who are listening, and you know where they are, and you know the hurt, and perhaps the anger, even the bitterness and hatred in the hearts of some. And we know you have the ability to touch hearts. And so I pray that your Spirit will touch the spirit of all those who are listening, and wherever they are, give them wisdom about the next step they can take with you in seeking to bring reconciliation in their relationship. I pray that for your glory. I pray that for their good, in the name of Christ. Amen.
Well, friend, I've personally seen many marriages where a couple has taken that step of a therapeutic and intentional separation and come back and rebuilt with a stronger marriage. Separation doesn't have to mean the end. It can actually be a new beginning. And if you personally are in a place where your marriage feels really stuck, or maybe even hopeless, I hope you heard what Dr. Chapman emphasized. There might still be important steps you haven't taken yet. Now, we're not talking about quick fixes, but meaningful guided steps toward addressing root issues and finding healing. And I also want to acknowledge that these situations are super complex and often very painful. If you're navigating something like this, please don't do it alone. I highly recommend that you pick up Dr. Chapman's book, One More Try, but you also need help from trained counselors, a wise pastor, and trusted mentors in your life. You might even consider checking out a counseling intensive that can help you navigate what it looks like to identify the deep issues and build towards wholeness. We'll link to Dr. Chapman's book, One More Try, in our show notes. And as always, you can find more resources at our website, AuthenticIntimacy.com. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week for more Java with Juli.